Welcome to Cold Case MHS, Monsters and Demons, where real education meets real life. I'm your host, Randy Hubbard.
And I'm your co-host, Lydia Lisko, and we thank you for listening.
Photographs faded, memories grown old, a story entangled, a crime so unfaithful, yet left untold.
Welcome back to Cold Case MHS. We really appreciate you coming back and listening. As we have gone through a lot of our cases, one thing that is very difficult about cold case research, especially when you're not in police force and things like that, is finding information. And unfortunately, in this particular case, it was kind of a weird situation for a young man to be killed the way he was in his apartment, and kind of a quiet guy, didn't have a whole lot in his background, and then the information about him is just very difficult to find. So I'm going to let the students introduce themselves and then talk a little bit about the case.
I'm Brom.
And my name is Sachaith.
So tell us a little bit about your guys' case.
He was found in his apartment with multiple gunshot wounds. He was found by his roommate who was out at a family meet and returned a couple days after the incident.
Yeah, so basically a little bit about his background. Franklin J. Benedict, who was a third shift manager at the Ashtabula Wal-Mart that was located near his apartment. One particular day, I guess some background about the incident is he wasn't supposed to work, but he decided to go in that day to pick up some extra hours, get some more money. After he returned home, it was about 11:30, 11:45, and the power was actually cut out in his home. So obviously that's something that no one wants to see, the power being cut out. It's completely dark. And so he started texting his girlfriend and his roommate Matt, who was out of town at the time, as Brom just told you. And at a certain point at around after 12, around 12:15, his text stopped, but his roommate and his girlfriend were pretty used to that phenomenon from Franklin, because his phone ran out quite often, allegedly. So he basically, didn't text them at all throughout the entire day, and that's the time he was assumed and found to be shot. But basically, after his roommate Matt came back the next day, he found Franklin lying down on the ground of the apartment, and he thought Frank tried to, fix the power by himself, which is what caused him to get shocked and again, find him in that state. But in all reality, Franklin had gotten shot, a couple of times.
So tell me a little bit about Franklin. Who was he as a person?
Well, Franklin was always a quiet guy, per se. He had a girlfriend. He went to Kent State, but he didn't graduate from there. Instead, he decided to start working right off the bat, or a bit sooner before he graduated. So he lived in a college town. It was the middle of the summer, so not many people were there. But Franklin, as a person, was very sociable. He was like an introvert, but at the same time, he was like a nice guy. Him and his roommate Matt actually complimented each other quite well, because Matt enjoyed, throwing parties and stuff, and Franklin wasn't necessarily opposed to any of that, but he didn't go out of his way to cause any trouble, but rather he kind of just went with the flow. So he was a really chill sort of guy, and that's what makes this case especially surprising.
Franklin was described by friends as an avid movie watcher and a craft beer enjoyer. He kind of considered himself to be a movie critic. He used to write reviews online all the time. And him and his friends would go out all the time just to enjoy a couple of beers and do some taste testings. But nothing out of the ordinary for just a college town.
So he didn't have any drug use or any taking money from other people or anything like that in his background that you know?
He had no criminal background, no drug use, no drug abuse, nothing like that in the background.
Yeah, so often when discussing victimology, we talk about high risk versus low risk. High risk victims are the ones who tend to be involved in more criminal activities such as drugs or prostitution, and then low risk seems to be more innocent victims who aren't involved in those sort of activities. So do you definitely think Franklin was more low risk than high risk?
Oh, absolutely, more low risk than high risk. I mean, he didn't do anything dangerous within his life.
Now, sometimes what can lead people to be in an unfortunate situation is sometimes if people have a standard routine that they follow, and if somebody follows that routine, they know more about them. Do you think Franklin was more of a consistent kind of guy and someone could easily figure out his pattern?
It's possible, considering he lived like a pretty casual life. He didn't, like, considering he didn't do too many like extravagant activities. It's possible that he could have just followed a pretty normal routine for a couple of years while he was working at the Walmart. But as of now, there's not really too much information to know a lot about that.
Yeah, and just to add to that a bit, Franklin specifically worked a lot, evidenced by the fact that he literally took an overtime shift to work at Walmart when he wasn't, supposed to be scheduled that day. But what we believe is that the person who ended up shooting Franklin knew him quite well, in the essence that even if he wasn't like as completely predictable, the person that committed the crime knew him enough to know that he was out at a particular day, knew him enough to know that his roommate was out that particular day, knew his apartment enough to scale the wall and climb in through the window and hide out in the bedroom waiting for him to come back, cut out the power. All of these things kind of lend itself to the thesis that the person that committed this crime on Franklin knew exactly what he was doing, but also at the same time knew exactly like how Franklin carried himself, or what Franklin's activities for that day were.
So getting back to the electricity part, did the electricity go out just in his apartment, or was the whole building, or was it the block?
There were no other reports about anybody else's electricity going out. It could have been possible, but from what we know, it possibly was just his apartment, considering he was shot next to like the breaker within the apartment in which he was trying to fix. It is possible that it could have been like other apartments as well, but there were just no other reports about it.
Yeah, and in addition, his roommate Matt actually made a statement a couple of years later, not an official statement, but he just posted to a social media platform when people were asking him questions about the case. And he said that nobody else in any of the other buildings had their power out. He said that he went and talked to other people. The police haven't published an official report about the power outages in other apartments, but Matt himself says that him talking to the other people in his apartment complex, it seemed pretty clear that their apartment was the only one that was targeted by the outage.
So you said the window was open, and that's
Yeah.
obviously how somebody got in.
Yeah.
Was there any other signs of forced entry, or is this what led the police to believe that this was the way the intruder got in?
Most of our information came from Matt directly through a Reddit forum, and he had stated to multiple people that the master bedroom window was propped open, which led him and police to believe that somebody had climbed in, scaled the building and climbed in through the master bedroom window. There was no other signs of forced entry. There was nothing stolen within the apartment, which confused a lot of people because that excluded the ability of a robbery gone wrong. But the only real sign of forced entry was the fact that the master bedroom window was propped open.
And you said he lives on the second floor
Yeah.
of his apartment complex? Okay, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so somebody had to scale those.
There was no
the
sign
side
of a
the wall, whatever, to
ladder
get
or
up there.
anything.
Nothing. So his roommate Matt, I know you got a lot of information through social media on Matt. Did you happen to look up anything about Matt? Did he have a criminal record? Did he do anything kind of crazy or anything like that?
There were attempts made. There are a surprising amount of Matt Wrights located within that area, but from what we were able to try and find, we couldn't find too much on his background information. But from what we found from posts from Franklin's friends, we've been able to find multiple posts with the two of them together and people talking about the two of them, and nobody has seemed to say anything awful about Matt.
And to kind of add to that, if Matt did have a criminal record, at the very maximum, what we found through Matt Wrights in the area would have been maybe involved in a bar fight or something completely random, a very small thing, because there are no serial killer Matt Wrights in the area that we found. So if Matt was to have a criminal record, I don't really assume that it would be crazy, to be completely honest.
Right. So you didn't find any drug possession or anything like that for any of Matt Wright in that area?
No, not that we could find.
Okay. Because the thing that you told me about Matt not being there, they supposedly came through his window, and they waited there for somebody to come back. Would it mean that either one, somebody was watching Franklin and knew that he was at work, or knew that he was not in there, and also had to know that Matt wasn't there? Or do you think Matt might have been the target and he just wasn't there?
Yeah, that's definitely a strong possibility, actually. But obviously there's no way to know the intentions of a killer who we don't even know the identity of. But looking at sort of their personalities, regardless of like whatever, like criminal record and their activities, looking at their personalities and just on social media, through like his Reddit forum, through police statements, through news articles, it kind of seems like Franklin was like the quiet one and Matt was sort of the guy that talked his talk. So if anyone's to sort of get upset about something that either of the two of them said, I guess it would be more likely that Matt Wright may have said something. But to be completely honest, again, there's no way for us to know for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, if the person knows who they are, it could have been dark. I didn't know if Franklin and Matt were similar builds, so he could have mistaken. But since we don't know what Matt looks like, we're not sure if that's a possibility. What about the day of Franklin's murder? I know obviously the power went out. Did anything else strange or weird happen while he was at work?
We also were able to find Franklin's girlfriend from when he was shot. She was also answering people's questions on this forum, and she seemed to be a very much of a superstitious type, but she seemed to have stated that like she went to go drop off lunch to Franklin when he was at work, and she had stated that multiple times throughout the day she had seen a black van waiting outside the Wal-Mart, and that is very much hearsay, so there's not too much we can do with that, but there does seem to be a lot of suspicion on her part that somebody was looking out for Franklin, which, I mean, it's very interesting, but that's kind of all she stated, and there was nothing to really back up why there would be a black van searching out for Franklin.
And another thing is actually she was so irked by the black van's presence and so irked by this overall aura of the situation that she actually was planning to go to their apartment after Frank came back from work, but she actually opted not to go because of like the bad vibes that she got. So,
I just wish she took Franklin with her instead of letting him go back to the apartment.
Yeah. Well, that or maybe said something to somebody else about that feeling. Because here's the thing about that, maybe I don't know her, and maybe she is one of those things that does the aura thing and all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of time that because maybe the person in the van was staring at her was why she was walking in or sitting out in the parking lot and things like that. And a lot of times that does kind of creep you out a little bit, and maybe she had a concern for a reason, and again, maybe it was just a feeling to her, but yet, somebody staring at you in a parking lot is kind of weird. So I can see where that is. Again, it would have been nice if she would have brought that up to other people. Talk a little bit about the struggles you guys had, though, because here's the thing in a case like this. It seems to be a random act of violence. A guy that's low-key, nobody really knows him. His roommate's kind of, he's an outgoing guy, but doesn't seem to be a bad guy. Why would they pick him? So talk a little bit about the struggles you had trying to find information.
Well, easily the biggest struggle we had was the fact that there were no police departments within the area that were able to hold on to his case file. After reaching out to about 6 different police departments within the area, none of them had ever heard of Franklin Benedict, and we found that very odd because this is such a random act of violence against somebody, and there were multiple pieces of evidence listed within like news articles from the scene that would have been really nice to have access to. Like they were stated that there were bullet casings found, that we wanted to know where he was shot because that could easily tell us, like depending on where somebody's shot, it can tell you how, like what their motive could have been, if it was just to kill them or if it was, like they were angry. But after talking to coroner offices, to police departments, nobody was able to find out who this guy was, and that really stumped us because we didn't understand where his file would have went to then.
Yeah, and probably the most annoying thing was when we called one police department and they say reach out to this other department, and we reach out to the other department and they say reach out to another department. It kind of just goes in a circle at that point. So that's something that we definitely found a lot of trouble in throughout this particular case.
Another thing that confused us is we found through 2 different news articles the name of the lead detective on the case. We were able to find out that he worked for the Kent City Police Department. We found through the staff names, we were able to find his number. And after we reached out, and for days we tried to reach out and left messages, and he was never able to answer, but one of the days we got redirected to him. And we were finally able to talk to him, and after listing the name and the information about the case, he had no idea what we were talking about, which really confused us because he was the lead detective on this case.
Yeah.
So we really want to know why this case was just kind of swept under the rug.
How long ago was it?
July 2015.
That's not too long, because sometimes some of the older
Yeah.
cases that we worked
That would
on,
make sense, yeah.
the case files, but 2015 is very recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will say this about some of those names in the article. A lot of times, the people that answer those things, it may say they're the lead investigator. They're really not. They're more like the communication person. And matter of fact, I had to deal with that same situation. I got a hold of somebody on my case and said that, they were the lead investigator. When I talked to him, he was all excited to talk to me, but he had no information whatsoever because he even said, I was just told what to say. So the guy that you talked to may not even really known about the case. He was just told by his supervisor, just say this to the news.
Yeah.
Was it a high risk area? I mean, was the area he lived in, was there a lot of violence or anything?
It's near Kent State. Like no. There's
Okay.
there's especially because it was like dead at the time. Not like dead like there were crimes, but it was dead like there's nobody there because it was a college town in the middle of the summer. The kids weren't even there. I guess like the place he was living, Lincolnwood Terrace, it's more like a off-campus sort of housing for juniors and seniors that go to Kent State, the same way that like people don't live on campus after their sophomore year. So yeah, so it was kind of like that, and because of that, there's not many people renting out the apartments, so it was very sparsely populated. At the same time, the town as a whole was near July 4th, so nobody really like suspected anything. It's not like there's like a large history of violence, but it was a pretty low time in an overall dead area too.
And because it was during July, that's why we suspect that nobody had reported sounds of gunshots anytime sooner, because it's a college town in July. There's constant fireworks going off. So we assume that neighbors had thought it was just fireworks going off in the neighborhood instead of gunshots.
So we mentioned how Franklin's case seems forgotten. Are there people out there fighting for him, making sure that his case is recognized? Because people probably haven't heard of him until we covered this case in your guys' presentation. So did you hear about anyone that's out there fighting for Franklin's justice?
Unfortunately, we were only able to find one person. Her name was Sarah, who was a good friend of Franklin around the time that he passed, but she had stopped every year she had posted a memorial for Franklin on Facebook, but she had stopped up until about 3 years ago. And then when we contacted her, she was very willing to talk. We were just never able to figure out a time to communicate with her. But around 3 years ago, she stopped posting memorials for him. And there is a memorial page for Franklin, but that stopped receiving updates to its profile around the time that he died.
Yeah, and the Reddit forum that we were talking about with Matt, his roommate, and his girlfriend, it was in 2021. So I guess that's like 6 years after the crime actually happened. So people are still like, I guess, fighting for him, but to be completely honest, it kind of just feels like his friends are like, something bad happened to someone that we love, to someone that we know, so we want to continue getting this information out. We want to continue talking about him, but because of how hard it is to find information, especially paired with the fact that it's, again, as I mentioned before, and as you mentioned, it's seen as sort of forgettable, I think that kind of took away the I don't know the exact word, but took away like the passion that they had for the case, because it just kept on feeling probably like they were getting shut down. But it seems to me that his friends really loved him, to the fact that 6-9 years later they're still willing to talk about him. They're still willing to talk about who he was as a person and what they think happened. But to be completely honest, when it comes to official authorities, official police departments, as Brahm and I talked to them, literally they completely forgot it. So I guess the only people that are fighting for him are his friends, and even they're kind of tapering off at this point because of how hard it is.
So you guys probably experienced what so many police departments experience when dealing with these kind of cases, and that's why there are so many cold cases, even just in the state of Ohio, not even to mention the nation. I don't know the exact number.
About 250,000 or more.
So why do you think cases go cold from your guys' experience that you struggle to get information? So how do you think a case like Franklin's can represent so many other forgotten cases?
Well, there's definitely a multitude of reasons, but definitely the one that went wrong with ours was just poor handling of the case itself. If anybody needs to work on a cold case, they need to be able to have access to the information of the case itself when it happens. And if that's not handled properly, if evidence is lost, if paperwork isn't filed correctly, you lose a lot of that information, and that if it's a cold case, that can't be recovered. And that requires people to just rely on a lot of hearsay, and none of that can really hold up as actual evidence.
And I mean, to be fair to a lot of the police departments, lack of funding for proper cold case units is a huge problem.
An unfortunate part about that is that some cases do get lost, and I know that is not a good thing. But unfortunately, moving from one jurisdiction to another, or there could be a fire in a warehouse. There's all kinds of weird things. A water main break,
Exactly.
Those are all kind of things that could have happened to that fire, and nowadays they don't know where it is. One thing that I think for you guys that was really difficult was trying to make those connections. And I know you had a lot of information at the beginning, and then it got really dead for a while, and then you got a little bit at the end. Talk a little bit about those connections, trying to get a hold of somebody and organize times, things like that. What did you learn from that?
So I guess the only people, again, that were sort of willing to talk about Franklin were his friends, but his friends are now, like 30, 32. They're pretty much in the midst of their working life. So it's really hard to get a hold of somebody who works a 9 to 5, who comes home probably tired from that 9 to 5, and has a lot of actual stuff to do for themselves and for their own life. So it's kind of hard to get a hold of people specifically people are willing to talk, but it's like, how are they gonna fit that into their own schedule, which kind of made it hard. I mean, we're all in this class for like an hour, like 4 hours every week.
What are you guys going to take from this experience? What lessons will you take with you after you graduate MHS?
There are 3 particular things that I've learned. First is to be able to work without a specific person looking over you, in the essence of like forcing you to like do this assignment this time, that assignment at that time. So I guess that past my life at MHS, past high school specifically, in high school there's homework due on Friday at 11:59. There's an essay due on Wednesday at 3 p.m. But in the real world, in college, those deadlines are much less stringent and more on you. So this class specifically has definitely helped me with sort of enforcing my own deadlines for myself, while simultaneously not, like, I guess, trying not to procrastinate. I wasn't successful at that all the times, but definitely trying not to procrastinate. And the second thing is, I guess, it helped me become more empathetic. For me personally, I've always been, I'm going into public policy in college, and for me, that's been like a huge thing for me for like my entire life. I've always wanted to be like a public defender, and then hopefully transition to becoming a public servant. But the one thing that I've sort of like missed to a certain extent, or I haven't really gotten the full brunt of that experience, is being able to understand that like situations that aren't like mine are still like very, very valid situations. It's hard to explain, but it's basically just the essence of just seeing somebody else or researching somebody else who's gone through something definitely helped me become more, like, care more. So now, like, I'm more than excited to hopefully work on some sort of criminal justice policy when I become a public servant or when I become a lawyer. And I guess the third and final thing is teamwork as well.
Yeah, this class has definitely taught me like a sense of independence and honestly a new sense of empathy. We've all like watched our own Netflix documentaries and felt bad, but when you have to do like your own research into a victim and see really who they were as a person and how it affected the people around them, it really just kind of gives you more insight on like how real these events are. It also teaches me to like value the people in my life a lot more, because we always assume when we see these things that, yeah, it's awful, but it could never happen to us. And it kind of teaches you that these things can happen to anybody at any time, and to just value the people you have in your life while you still have them.
I appreciate the work that you put into this. I know there were times that we kind of butted head a little bit about getting you over that procrastination, but we all do it. I mean, that's part of life. You got to learn how to handle that. In general, though, I think you guys did a really good job, especially with not having information. That's the hardest part. I think the perseverance of getting rejected over and over again is something that you had to learn. And I think it's good for you, because I know now you can keep doing it, and hopefully you guys can keep doing that too. So if anybody has any information out there about his case, what should they do? Who should they call?
Well, without a doubt, the Kent City Police Department. That's what every source we've found has told us to reach out to. So, without a doubt, the Kent City Police Department.
Or if you feel uncomfortable going to the police, feel free to contact us at coldcase@masonohioschools.com.
And I think that the biggest thing about all the things that we're doing, especially even your case, is that it's not forgotten. We are still trying hard to keep Franklin's, legacy alive, in hopes that maybe one day somebody hears this podcast and they say they remember him, they know something about it, that they'll give that information out. Again, thank you, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cold Case MHS.
This podcast was edited by the students of Cold Case MHS and produced by Mr. Hubbard and myself. The music was performed and written by Alexa Dahl, and the artwork was created by the students of MHS Design Studio Internship.
Please consider sharing this podcast to bring more light to these victims. Tune in next time to Cold Case MHS, Monsters and Demons.
Photographs faded, memories grown old. A story entangled, a crime so unfaithful, yet left untold. A puzzle in the dark, we will find that spark. There you've left their mark. Victims in memory, let's find the enemy. We won't leave it be. Behind every shadow, a story to be told. Of lives that were special, but some hearts have grown cold. In the depths of the